Greetings everyone, back again with another installment on the Predicta full dress. As you can see, we've started some of the work on the chassis, mainly on the sweep board for the horizontal section. That seemed like a easy place to start with, and luckily I was able to keep all these wires in place. Nice thing about this board is once you get it undone from the mounting lugs, you can just flip it up and then get at everything underneath. So makes it a lot easier than having to tag all these wires and unwrap them and that. If you work on a lot of these sets and do have to remove the boards, I'd recommend getting a wire wrapping and unwrapping tool. This has a little cover over the end of it, but anyway, you can use the unwrapping tool to unwrap them, and it's nice because you can get some of these are soldered in place, so you can get the solder hot and then screw this on there to undo the wire, and it comes off quite nicely. And then also, if you want to rewrap the wires, you can use the wrapping tool part of it. If you have enough length of wire to use fresh wire for that, that's what I'd recommend, although many of these are kind of on the short side. They use just enough wire. Sometimes people I know have straightened the wire out and rewrapped it. That can be hit or miss because sometimes the wire will try to break off in the wrapping tool and then you only get a few turns on there. So if you can't rewrap them or don't want to, get the pins really clean, and then you can solder these back on, and then it's a lot easier to take apart the next time. So you can see we got mostly all the caps replaced in here. Some of the K networks fit in here. I need to fabricate new ones. Some people prefer to leave them in. I like to replace them anyway. I also replace all the resistors in these types of sets because one of the hallmarks of a Predicta television is they made a very compact chassis and they crammed it into a very tight fitting cabinet. Fortunately, this cabinet has a little more room to breathe in it, but I don't want to take any chances. The old carbon comp resistors drift. These are film resistors. They stay rock steady at temperature. So once you get the set all adjusted right, you shouldn't have to keep messing with it as things warm up. Also have a couple other parts that I need to order that I'm waiting on. But one thing I noticed about this set is it seems to use much better quality tube sockets than the other Predicta models. I got an example of one. But here's a junker board from a 17-inch Predicta, and you can see they've got these flat wafer type tube sockets that are very prone to getting brittle over time with heat, and then a lot of times tubes get stuck in them. You're trying to rock the tube back and forth to get it to loosen, and the little lugs inside work back and forth and eventually fatigue and break. So that's another reason why I'm not fond of those sockets. So looking around, the IF board doesn't look bad. Have to go through that. That's pretty clean. I was able to get this board pretty cleaned off with some Q-tips and rubbing alcohol. Somebody's replaced this rheostat. And I also need to do a little more research to find out what's up with that inductor. Find out if it should indeed be replaced, or you can probably get away with it. The set worked with it like that, but like I said before, I like to put things back the way they were. So one thing I also like about this chassis is that it's fairly flat on the sides, so you can easily tip it up on end to work on it. This will probably be the next area I go after. This is the vertical and audio and video section. We see the audio output transformer here. There's your power transformer. The sound IF coils, sync separator over there. So that'll be probably in the next installment of this series. Got your focus tap and your line connection over here, your isolation resistor and your line filtering cap, aka the death cap. I always make sure these get replaced because these bumblebee caps are notorious for exploding when they short out or go bad. I always like to keep this little example handy. This is a line filtering cap that had actually blown apart in another Predicta set. So if people poo-poo that idea, I always bring this out and say, well, here's what can happen. Sounds like a small gunshot going off and those things finally blow. So there's that. There's a couple bumblebees floating around loose here. Twist and place style fuse. When I first saw these years ago, I thought they were actually a circuit breaker, but no, just a spring-loaded fuse, and it's got these little tabs on it. I can get this out of here. Yep. So, time delay fuse. Can't tell if it's... Looks like it may have blown. I'm not sure. I'll have to look at that. Add that to the list of things to address. Some other interesting stuff I noticed turning this around. There's a little guard that attached here. This is where the 5U4 rectifier tube sits, and it's got a bit of a heat shield. It's like fish paper for this section of it, so it doesn't contact any of these terminals. But then it's riveted to a metal plate which locks into this little hole here, and the fish paper was really brittle, and when I went to remove it, it just broke off. So I'm going to have to fabricate something new there. Eventually, the filter capacitors for the power supply and other parts of the circuits are going to get replaced. This one should be easy because there's this bracket right here that I can mount terminal strips to and then just attach the caps to there. This one's going to be a little trickier because it's buried under a bunch of spaghetti, but I should probably be able to mount it to the side of the flyback housing because this is the bottom of the high voltage rectifier tube socket here. This is another fun little rat's nest of stuff, but another thing I noticed is there's this big resistor here, and why is there a big jumper across it? I have to look at the schematic. I don't know if these sets had a separate filament winding, because remember, they used 6.3 volt filament tubes in all of the chassis, but the 21 EAP for picture tube was a 2.31, and so a lot of times they had a separate winding on there. However, this set was modified for a 21 FDP force, so maybe there could be a reason why that's in there. Again, I need to really sit down and look at the schematic and trace that through and figure out what that's for and why that could have been done. It looks like this set had some things jury-rigged on it to keep it going. One other thing too I wanted to point out is this ground lug. You remember in the last video that was rigged up with a hunk of wire because the original broke off. I got a donor from another chassis, so I soldered that in, and then I'll bend it over, and then when it's time to remount that board, we'll just solder it in place. So that's the basic overview. You know, some of the stuff will be pretty straightforward. This is going to be probably the biggest challenge in here just because of all that stuff. So anyway, it'll be fun. One other item, the controls, at least they all look pretty good. They should just need a cleaning, some fader lube to make sure that they're working nice and smoothly and quietly. Here's the pilot light. This is the first time I've seen one with a cardboard light guide with a little hole in the side of it. Most Predictas just have a straight cardboard tube in there, which is usually crumbling or gone. But this one looks in pretty decent shape. Now, one curious thing about this is most Predictas have a push-on, push-off volume switch, but as you can see, there's no switch attached here, and there's no other switches anywhere else, at least directly connected to the chassis, that are for that. So I got to looking in the set and noticed something interesting. Let's go take a look. So we're back inside the set, and I started thinking about how, remember, the tuner goes up and down. Well, the latch mechanism for it that controls it, if you look in there, there's a switch. So when the channel knob is up, the switch is closed and turns on the set. And when you want to shut the set off, it depresses the switch, opens the contacts, and the set turns off. So Kind of a slick way of doing it. I'll have to check that switch out and make sure it isn't prone to the same problems that other Predicta switches are, where they tend to burn out over time. But add that to the list. So till then, we'll keep plugging along, and we'll catch everyone next time. See ya.